Hey friends, and welcome to this session on fractions, percentage and ratio and proportion. So this will be a two sessions, right? In first session we will cover fractions and percentages. In second session we would cover ratios and proportion. So this is again an important topic as far as our CSAT preparation is concerned. There can be few questions from directly from this topic, or there can be questions which are using the basics, the concepts of this topic, but the questions are from profit and loss, or from compound interest, simple interest, or from averages, or speed, distance and time. So this forms basis of our other topics in arithmetic. So let's go into these topics one by one. So in all these topics we would be covering firstly the fractions, right? Let me increase the font first. So in fractions we would be covering definitions, how to compare fractions, and some applications. In percentage we would be covering definitions, changing fractions to percentages and vice versa, percentage change, and two-step change in percentage. So let's do firstly these two, and then we will go to ratio and proportion. So fraction, what is fraction, right? Let me increase the font here as well. Let me increase the font of the overall thing. So now what is fraction? Any number of the type x by y is called a fraction. So this means what? This means that out of y parts we are representing x parts, right? So for example 2 by 7 means that out of 7 equal parts we have 2 parts with us. So to put things in perspective, let's say we have half an apple with me. This means what? This means that if we divide an apple into 2 parts, one of the part is with me. The one part, this one, is called numerator, and the bottom part is called the denominator. So this is what fraction is. So for example, let's take another example to put things in perspective. So if we have, let's say if we have around 50 apples, right? And I give you 10 apples. How many apples did I give you? I give you 10 by 50, right? So this is the fraction, right? So this is the part of apples which you have, right? So 10 apples out of 50 apples you have. So you have how much? 1/5 of apples. So we can reduce the fractions into the minimum basic fraction, right? So we can cancel the common factors and we get 1 by 5. This means that you have 1/5 of apples, right? So out of total apples you have 1/5 with you, right? So this is what the fraction means. So if there are, let's say 70 students in a class, out of which 20 are boys, right? So how many boys are there out of total students? They would be 20 by 70, right? So 20 by 70 represent the number of boys in the class. So we say that the number of boys are 2/7 of the class, right? So this 2/7 means what? If we consider the entire class as single unit, right, as one, out of those one, 2/7 would be boys, right? So changing fraction helps us in comparing things, right? So for example, taking the similar example, in class A there are 70 students, out of which 20 are boys. So we have 2/7 boys. Now in class B there are 80 students, out of which 30 are boys, right? Now if the questioner asks which of the class has more boys, right, when compared with each other. So number of boys in class B would be 3 by 8, right? Now we can now compare it. Initially we could not, because the number of total students in each class were different, but now when we represent that in fractions, we have come to a common minimum denominator, that is in one class, class A, the number of boys are 2/7, in class B the number of boys are 3/8. So now we can compare which have higher boys, right? So now we have talked about comparison. Now let's see how to compare the fractions. There can be three cases. First case is the denominator is the same. If let's take a case 1/5, 2/5, 3/5 and so on. So in this case, if denominator is the same, just compare the numerator. The higher the numerator, the greater is the fraction. So 3/5 is greater than 2/5 is greater than 1/5 and so on. If the numerator are same, we have to compare the denominator. Higher the denominator, the smaller is the fraction. So here 5/11 is smaller than 5/9 and 5/9 is smaller than 5/8. So this is how we compare the fractions. If both numerators and denominator are different, so let's take an example, 2/5 and 31/40. How do we do it? We take LCM of the denominators of all the fractions we have. So LCM of 5 and 40 is 40. We try to convert the denominators of all the fractions into that LCM. So to convert this 5 into 40, what do we have to do? We have to multiply it by 8. So we multiply the numerator by 8 and also the denominator by 8 and we get 16/40. Now can we compare 16/40 by 31/40? Yes, we can, and we get 31/40 is greater than 16/40. So this is how we do the comparison. There is one more method which is given in your TMH book. I think it's not required because in your final exam, in your CSAT exam, there would not be any question to compare the fractions. There would be more complicated questions, and in that complicated questions you would be using the concept of comparison, and you can use this small way of comparing the fractions and it would be done and you would be able to do that. So now let's do some questions on fractions, right? Now question 1 says a person spends 350 rupees on food, 980 on clothing and put the rest in the bank account, which is 1/8 of his total salary. Find his total salary. So I'll give you around 1 to 2 minutes to solve this question. So try and solve this question yourself and then we'll do it together. So I hope that you were able to do it. It's a very basic question. This would not be there in your CSAT exam because it's very basic question. There are slightly more complicated questions. So he says that he has saved 1/8 of his total salary. So he has spent what? So if the total he has out of one total salary, which is 1, he has spent 1/8, right? So he is left with 7/8 of his total salary. So this is what he is left with. So 7/8 of his total salary would be equal to what he has spent on food and clothing. So 7/8 of the total salary, let's say total salary is T. So if total salary is T, 7 by 8 of T he has spent, and what he has spent is 350 plus 980, right, which is equal to 1330. So 1330 he has spent. So we can find T from this. Just do 1330 multiplied by 8 and this whole divided by 7. So you would be able to find T. Whatever the value of T comes, you would be able to do that. So this is how we do this very basic question. Now let's go to a slightly complicated question, right? It says a person spends 3/8 of his salary on food, 1/12 his salary on education, and 1/4 his salary on clothing. He is left with 550. Find the total salary. Again, I'll give you 2 minutes. Just try and solve this, and we'll do it together afterwards. I hope that all of you have done it, but let's see how to do it together. So let the total salary be T out of, or we can say let the total salary be 1, right? So we can assume that total salary is 1 whole. So 1 is the total salary, out of which 3/8 he spent on food. So 3/8 goes for food. What else he spent? 1/12 he spends on some education, and then 1/4 he spends on clothing. So he has spent total this much salary. So we'll take LCM. LCM would be 24, right? So it would become, the numerator would become 9 plus 2 plus 6, right? This whole divided by 24, which would be 17 by 24. So 17 by 24 he has spent. So what he is left with? He is left with 1 minus 17 by 24, right? Which is equal to 7 by 24. So he is left with 7 by 24. If the total salary is T, he is left with 7 by 24th part of that T, right? And that is equal to 550, right? And from this you can very easily find what is T. So this is how we do it. We do this question, right? So this is what he spent, and what is left is 1 minus what is spent, right? So fraction, by making fraction, by using fractions, we now can subtract it from 1, right? That's the use of fraction, right? Now same question but with a slight twist. It says a person spends 3/8 of his salary on food, 1/12 of the rest part on education, and 1/4 of the remaining on clothing. What he is left with is 550. Now again we have to find the total salary. Again we'll give you 2 minutes to do this. So try to do this in 2 minutes. I hope you have attempted it and done it right. Let's see how to do it. So he has spent 3/8 on his food, right? And 1/12 of rest on his education. What does this mean? This means that after spending something on food, he has spent 1/12 of what was remaining on education, right? So he has spent 3/8 on food. What he is left with? He is left with 1 minus 3/8, right? That's what he is left with, which means he was left with 5/8. Now out of this 5/8 salary, he has spent 1/12 on education. So he, out of this 5/8, right, he has spent 1/12 on education. So he would be left with what? Some part, right? So 5/8 1 minus 1 by 12 he is left with, which means he is now, after spending with for food and after spending for with education, he is left with 5/8 into 11 by 12, right? This is what he is left with. Now out of this, he spends 1/4 on his clothing, so he is left with what? 3/4. So out of this, he is left with 3/4. Now this is given to be equal to 550, right? So this is the final thing which he is left with, right? So if the total salary was T, he was left with this part of T, right? This fraction of T. Now we can find T easily from this. So this is how we do it. So again, how are we doing it? Initially he has complete salary, which is 1, right? Now out of which he has spent 3/8. So now he is left with 5/8 of his total salary. So to make things easy, if he has T salary, he has spent 3/8. So just to make you think in a easier way, so he is left with 5/8 of T, right? Now out of this 5/8 of T salary, he spends 1/12 in education, right? And he would be left with 1 minus 1/12, right? So which is 11 by 12. So this whole into T. This is what he is left with. Now out of this, he spends 1/4 on clothing, which means he is left with 3/4 of this thing, right? So we have done 3/4 of this thing, which is equal to 550, and hence we can find T. So this is how we use basic fractions to do the question, right? So by reducing anything into fraction, for example, when we say that there are 30 oranges and 50 guavas, right? If let's say we say there are 30 oranges and 50 guavas, then a question can be, what is the how many oranges are there in total fruits? So total fruits are 80, right? And oranges would be, so these are total fruits, and 30 are oranges. So to make things easy and to put things in perspective, we would say that the oranges are 3/8 of the total fruits. So we say oranges are 3/8. So this would make things easier, right? So in this lot, 3/8 would be oranges, right? So this is what we mean by fractions. This means out of 8 parts, if we take 8 fruits, 3 would be oranges. Out if we take all the 80 fruits, 30 would be oranges, right? So this is how fractions are made and used in our exam. Now an extension to fraction is percentage, right? It's just an extension to fractions. Now when we say percent, we have two words, percent, right? This means if we have 100 parts, what part are we talking about, right? For example, 19%, right? We all know we have all heard 19% as a term. What does this mean? This means that if we have 100 parts of something, we are talking about 19 parts, right? For example, when we say we get 90% marks, this means that if our maximum marks were 100, right, we got 90 out of that, right? So we write 90%. Now if I say that I got 90% and my maximum marks were 25, what does this mean? This means that out of 25 I have 9 by 10 90 by 100 marks which I have achieved, right? So out of 25 I got 90%, right? What does this mean? So 90% is 100th part of 90 parts out of 100, right? So 90 part out of 100, right? So I can find what does this mean. This means I achieve some marks which is 22.5, I suppose, right? So it means I got 22.5 marks. So this is what we mean by percentage. So there would be random marks, right? Maximum marks can be 35 or 25 or 45. Now if we have to compare, right, somebody might have got around 22 marks in this, somebody might have got around 30 marks in this, somebody might have got around 35 marks in this, right? Now we have to compare who got greater marks. Then how do we do it? We convert it into percent. This means out of 22 out of 25 he has got 22 marks. Percentage means that if the maximum marks were 100, what would be his marks, right? So now he's got 22 out of 25, right? Had it been 100, we would have multiplied by 100 to get the percentage. So this would be 88%. So let's take it 40 to make calculations easy, and let's take it 50, right? So out of 40 he has got 30 marks, right? So 30 out of 40. Had it been 100, how much marks would be there, right? It would have been 75%. Now in this case it says he has got 35 out of 50. Had it been 100, he would have got 70%. Now we can easily compare that this guy has got more marks than this guy, these two guys. So if we say A, B, C, A have more marks than B, B have more marks than C. So that's why we write them in percentage, so that we can compare it, right? We could have also compared the fractions, right? So we could have also compared 22 by 25, 30 by 40 and 35 by 50, right? And we could have seen that 22 by 25 is greater than 30 by 40 is greater than 35 by 50, but it would have been more effort, right? So to reduce this effort, we just devised a mathematical tool and we call it percentage. So percentage is nothing but a mathematical tool to make things easy and make comparison easy for us, right? So that's what it means. Percentage is, it's nothing but simply a tool to make things easy for us, right? So again, a very simple question. Out of 25 I have got 16. What is my percentage? We have already done this, so we're not going to do this again. Again the extension says, now let's say I got 40% marks, right? How many marks did I get out of 20, right? So from 100 I got 40, which means 40 by 100, and if it has been 25, we got 25, we got this much, and we multiply this to get 10 marks, right? So that's how we do it. Now if we are given something like 70%, right, can we convert it into fraction? Can it be written as 70 by 100? right? It can be written as 70 by 100. We can further simplify it by 7 to 7 by 10, right? Now if there is a fraction, right, let's say 1 by 5, can we write it as percentage? Yes, we can. We can say 1 by 5. So to write anything in percentage, we have to multiply it by 100. We'll multiply it by 100 and it would become 20%, right? Similarly, we can say 1/4 is 1 by 4 is equal to 25%. 1 by 6 is equal to 16.6666%, right? So this is how we convert fractions into percentage. Now if in exam you are given 16.6666, you should be able to see that it is 1/6, right? In fraction it is 1/6. So I just suggest that you learn all the fractions from 1 by 2, 1 by 3, 1 by 4 up till 1 by 20. And you learn all these fractions and you should be able to convert them into percentage, and you should be able to convert the percentages into fractions as well, because things would be easier when we are working in such way in DI questions, right? So in DI questions you would need to convert fractions into percentages or percentages into fractions very often. So I just request and just recommend to learn all the fractions from 1 by 2 to 1 by 20 in percentages and vice versa. So just do that and see that you commit that to your memory, right? So this is how we convert percentages into fractions and fractions into percentage. So for example, if we are given 25%, how do we convert it into fraction? 25% means 25 parts out of 100, which means 1 part out of 4. So it is 1/4. So you have to simplify it, write it in the simplest form, and that's how we convert percentage into fraction. So this is a very basic thing which we would use very often in DI. Now let's go to another topic, which is percentage change, right? Again we'll do it with question. So he says that my salary is 3,000, now it becomes 45,000. By what how much did my salary increase? So what is the percentage increase in my salary? We have to just find that. So how do we find that? So the formula of percentage increase is new minus old. New minus old is the change, right? So this is the change. This is equal to change in something. So this change happens over what? Happens over something which was old, right? So this change happens over old, and multiplied by 100 would give us percentage change. If new minus old is negative, then it is called percentage decrease. If new minus old is positive, it is called percentage increase. Now in this question, my salary increased to 4,500. It was 3,000 earlier. So change is, there is an increase of 1,500, right? Over what? Over 3,000, which was my initial salary. So what is the percentage increase? So we'll multiply it by 100 and it becomes 50%, right? So there is 50% increase in my salary, right? Right? Or we can say, can we say that our salary increased by 50 by 100, right? Which means my salary increased by half, right? So if initially it was 1, now it becomes 1 plus 1 by 2, right? Which means it becomes 1.5 times the original salary, right? My new salary is 1.5 times the original salary. So this is what we do when we do these questions, right? We just convert fraction in percentage into fraction, and we see that the old new thing is what times the old thing, right? It would become more clear if we do a next question, which is this. The next question says, if the length of the rectangle is increased by 30% and width is decreased by 12%, then find the percentage change in area. Again, you have 2 minutes to try and do this question. So I hope you have done it and you have done it correctly. Let's see how to do it. So let the length be L, the breadth be B, right? So LB is the old area. So this is the old area, right? Old area. Now he says the length is increased by 30%. So initially length was L, the new length would be L plus this 30% of L. There is an increase, right? So we can say this would become, just convert this 30% into fraction, right? So it would, new length becomes 1.3 times the old length. Now breadth earlier was B, now there is a decrease, right? So decrease by 12%, 12% of the initial, right? So whenever it says there is a decrease, then decrease 12% decrease from the earlier, the initial one. So it now becomes 0.88B. Now the new area becomes what? 1.3 L multiplied by 0.88B, right? So just find this. This would be what? You have to just calculate this, right? This would be 1.144B LB, right? This is it. So this is the new area. So what is the percentage change? New area minus old area, which would give us 0.144 LB divided by old area, which is LB, and this whole multiplied by 100, right? So this would give us 14.4%. So that would be our answer, 14.4%. So you don't have to just do this, right? So you are given this new area. So the increase is anything which is beyond this one. So all the decimals would be increased. So increase happened by 0.144, right? So this is the increase. And when we do it in percentage, we multiply it by 100. So 0.144 multiplied by 100, which gives us 14.4. So this is the application of percentage increase and percentage decrease. These type of questions come very often in our CSAT exam. So you have to be very vigilant and do a practice of these kind of questions. Now next question, again on percentage increase and percentage decrease. It's a slightly different question, so I hope that you would do it correctly. Again 2 minutes to do this question, and your time starts now. So done. Let's see how to do it. So we have to find the original cost of tea, right? Which means we have to find the cost per kg. Let that cost price be P, right? So initially we spent 600 rupees and we get certain kgs of tea, right? So how much kgs would we get? 600 by P would be the amount of tea which we got. Now the new price of tea is what? It has reduced by 25%, which means it becomes what? So if initial price was 100, now 25 has been reduced, it becomes 75 or 75%, right? So this becomes 75% of original price, which we can say it becomes 0.7 times P, right? Now for 0.75 P per kg, how much tea would have been purchased? This means 600 divided by 0.75 P, which means 800 by P would have been purchased now, and 800 by P is 10 kgs more than 600 by P. So we just subtract it, 800 by P minus 600 by P should be equal to what? 10 kgs, because now we are able to purchase 10 kgs more, right? So if you solve it, you would get P is equal to 20. So this was slightly tricky question, but yes, if you go step by step and you understand that 25% reduction means now it has the new price is 75% of the old price, right? Which means it is 0.75 P, which means the tea purchased would be 800 P, right? And the difference is 10 kgs, and hence the price is 20. You would be able to solve it if you go in proper step-by-step way as I have done it, right? Now let's go to next question, which is almost similar, but yes, it's good to practice the questions. The more you practice, the better would be your solutions. So the question says the price of coffee increased by 10%, right? What should be percentage reduction in consumption so that our expenditure remains the same? So just try and solve it. Just try to formulate the solution in minimum steps possible. So I hope that you have done it. Let's see how to do it together. Let the initial price be C, and initially he is P per kg, right? And he consumes C kg of coffee, which means total expenditure is PC. Now the new price is 10% higher, which means 10% higher than P, right? Which means now the new price is 1.1 P. Now what should be the new consumption? It should be C divided by 1.1, right? Only then we would get it equal to PC, right? So the new consumption becomes C divided by 1.1, right? Or we can say the new consumption is, if you just reduce it, it becomes 10C by 11, right? So this is the new consumption. Old consumption was C. So what is the percentage change? It is new minus old, which means 10 by 11, 10C by 11 minus C, right? Which means it becomes minus C by 11. So this is the change in consumption. Minus sign means there is reduction, right? What is the percentage change? It is the change minus C by 11, right? So just put it in brackets to make things simpler, divided by old consumption, which is C, and this whole multiplied by 100. So it becomes, so minus means reduction, so we says 100 by 11 percent decrease, right? We don't put minus sign in front of percentage, we just write increase or decrease. In your answer choices also there would be written something increase, something decrease. So it is 100 by 11 percentage decrease or reduction. So this is how we solve it in 3-4 steps, or in less than 1 minute you could have done this correctly. Now last question on percentage. This is a very common question which is usually asked in exams like CSAT. It says if I get 25% more marks than you, how much percentage are your marks less than mine, right? So this is this is trying to derive a very basic concept that we find percentage on certain number, right? Let's see. I'll give you around 2 minutes to solve this, and then we'll see how to solve it together. Now let's do it. When I say I got 25% more than yours, right? So now I am taking your marks as the base to calculate my marks, right? So what we are, when I am saying that I got 25% more than yours, your marks are the base for my marks, right? So if your marks are, let's say Y, my marks would be 25% more than Y, which means my marks would be, so this is your marks and my marks would be 1.25 times, right? Your marks. Now he says how much percentage are your marks less than mine, right? So this is important. Now he is trying to compare, or he is trying to write your marks in terms of my marks, right? So your marks are Y, my marks are 1.25Y. How much is it less than my marks, right? So it would be your marks minus my marks, right? The comparison is done basis my marks. So the denominator should be my marks, right, not your marks. So usually we make mistake that we do it, we put the denominator as y only, right, and then to make it into percentage we multiply it by 100. So this would become minus 0.25, y and y I am cancelling, divided by 1.25, this whole multiplied by 100, right, and this is equal to 20%. So your marks are 20% less than mine. So why we have put my marks in denominator is we are comparing, the question is asking how much percentage your marks is less than mine, right? So the comparison is done vis-a-vis my marks, right? So that's why it comes in denominator. In all the above questions, the percentage increase happen or percentage decrease happens on the original thing, right? So that was the denominator always, right? The original thing. So you have to just see where is the comparison taking you, and then you have to do the question. So we could have done this without taking these variables, right? We could have assumed that your marks were 100, my marks were 125, right? 25% more, so my marks would be 125. How many marks less do you have? You have 25 marks less vis-a-vis my marks, which is 125, and you have to multiply it by 100 to get 20%. So you can even cut these variables wherever possible. So these are two ways. One is by assuming that your marks are 100, then my marks would become 125. So in percentage questions, most of the questions, or many of the questions I would say, can be solved without taking x or y as variable, but taking 100 as base assumption, right? And then you can build on the question from there. You would understand more of this once you do the practice exercise, which I would upload after the concept session is over. This is all for our session 1 on fractions and percentages. I hope that you have understood it well. This is a very basic topic, but very important as far as our CSAT is concerned. I hope that you have taken some good learning from this, and I hope that with good practice you would be able to master it. Thanks as of now, and I'll upload the second session on ratio and proportion soon. Thanks, and all the best for your preparations.